Once you have printed out the cross template on your stained glass paper, whatever pattern you've chosen to use, then you're ready to do your crosses. And this gives you an idea from the cutouts of how that can look. So that could be pretty just left white, or you could color those in, or you can cut them out of brown paper to more resemble a wooden cross. And now you have 3 crosses on the page, and you've got some added texture because of the cutouts. Now all you have to do is glue those down. Now that you have your crosses glued down, you have a couple of options. You can leave it as is, or you can outline around each of the crosses to give it a little dimension. I just used a black marker and went around the edges of mine. Since stained glass often has that metallic look, because it's soldered together, you can go over these lines and around the crosses with a metallic pen if you want to have that look. I think it'll really depend on what color background do you have versus the crosses, and whether or not your metallic pens are going to show up. But either way, now we are ready to add some verses. So digging through my sticker stash, I discovered that I had these fun chipboard letters that are all nice and glittery. They're Alpha Chips by Me and My Big Ideas. That's probably a Hobby Lobby brand. Anyway, I decided, since I'm only going to do the one verse and they had dimension and glitter to them, that is enough for this page. And I just wrote the reference verse up there, Mark 16:6. Now I'm ready to add that into my Bible Quilt Journal. So you can tell I've added this background page of black just to give it a little contrast. You can do that to frame it if you would like, or just leave it plain. And then all you would do is glue the back of it, press it on there firmly, and then I typically add washi tape around the edges to reinforce it. But since I want to have it on display during the Easter season, I'm not going to put it in my journal just yet. I'm going to slip it into an acrylic frame that I already have put some paper in. It's an 8x10 size frame, so these Bible Quilt Journal pages work just right, and you can slide it in there. I still have my heart on there from Valentine's. But this gives you an inexpensive way to display it during the Easter season. And then when Easter is over, you can put that page into your journal and maybe put another one on display for the next season. Now we have our pattern for this inner circle, or the sun rays. From our copy paper, these are going to be our cutout templates, and they're numbered. So as you choose which decorative paper, color paper that you're going to make each piece, go ahead and pencil in that number on the back side, so it'll be easy to tell them apart. And You can just play around with the patterns and the colors. Isn't that fun to see how different colors and patterns just really highlight that area? So if you like your color palette and patterns the way that they are, then all you would do is grab a glue stick and glue each of these pieces down. And then you'll have the option then if you want to come back around each of those pieces and highlight it with a maybe a black outline or a metallic outline. I glued each of my little stained glass pieces on there, and then I used a ruler and a plain black pen just to accentuate the division lines between each of those panels so it would show up a little bit more. You would have the option if you wanted to add some stitch marks along each of those, but I'm just banking on that's already built into the template, and then I added some stitches just on the primary cross. So I think I'm going to leave mine plain so it doesn't get too busy. And again, I just used one phrase from Mark 16:6 because I had so much pattern and color, and I just wanted to really highlight that, and it'll be a pretty page to display during Easter. On my tag, I had some of this fun little polka dot paper, but it is just regular scrapbook paper and it's pretty flimsy. So I just used some of the solid cardstock and glued them back to back. And so I'll have that pretty polka dot on the next page. Again, I just needed to keep this simple so it doesn't draw too much away from the focal area here. And I haven't glued it in there yet because I think I am going to display it. And when Easter's over, then I will glue that into my journal. You can add color to your crosses by shading them in with colored pencil, using pastels. Maybe you want to get really creative and try acrylic paints or watercolors. Another option is to cut crosses out of a solid piece of paper. And then you would just glue those on. And that's going to give you just a little bit of an added dimension to your page. However you do that, then you are now ready to add verses into each of the quilt squares in the background. If you decide that you really like the texture of having the paper on there, then you would have the option of using your copy paper cutouts to pick an element. You could do that, these outside areas, or you can do this inner circle to cut those out and add some additional paper elements in there. Let me give you a little glimpse of what that would look like. you have your pieces cut just a little bit smaller, then your color pencil zones in the back will come through just a little bit. So if you like that effect, you could even come back through and trim each of these just a little bit more. So that would really accentuate that area of the sun and the rays bursting out from that. And then maybe you just want to add your verses in those background squares. So that just gives you another option. I have transferred all of my stained glass pieces onto my monthly journal page, which is the 8.5 by 11. And you can tell the importance of having it numbered so that you can reassemble it fairly easily. And I went ahead and made some color lines here so you know that these three go side by side. And I just give myself a hint when these are all separated that this is the lower left, this is the upper right. That'll just help you be able to reassemble it fairly easily. So now comes the fun part of deciding which element of the stained glass you want to really highlight. Part of that is going to depend on how many verses you want to have on the page, or maybe it's the decorative papers that you have available to you, but you have several options. You can do every single piece if you want. You could just focus on the crosses. So let me take those out. And I copied this on a colored piece of paper because I already had a white set and I didn't want to confuse myself because they're slightly different sizes. So that gives you an idea of just doing the crosses. You could also play around with, you take two pieces out, and since these are symmetrical on the page, you may want to cut these out of the same decorative paper to balance it out. You could focus a certain color palette on the lower part of the page because that's more of the ground, and then a different color palette, maybe some blues at the top since that's more of the sky. You could do all the way around in one, combination of colors and just maybe alternate those all the way through. So that you would have a certain color pattern around there, and then focus on a different one here. Maybe you want to do yellows and oranges. Once you have all of your pieces cut out, then the fun part is placement. You may not go through as many substitutions as I did, but I wanted to just show you how changing just a couple of the panels makes a big difference. And what I got to thinking is I needed more solid so that I could write out my scripture and have it be visible. But I still really like some of these patterns that had the curly cues and the sweet little clouds. And I just put the darker, more saturated colors in the center because those are so small that I'm likely not going to write a whole lot of words on those. So if you have really fun paper that you want to use, that's probably your zone to do that. And I just kind of fell into having darker saturated colors in the center and then just a lighter hue of that same color towards the outside. Um, you could do the whole thing in pastels. You could do it all in patterns. Um, if you really wanted to, you could add another layer of complexity, and you could cut some of these and do an extension on that. But again, the more pattern and different segments that you have in there, it's going to be harder to write full scriptures on there. And that's the ultimate goal we have, even though we're playing with all these pretty pieces. Another tip I will share that I learned through this is your cutouts. If you cut like I do, I tend to cut around the perimeter of it. So each of them ended up being a little wider than I needed. So as I went to place all these, I found that I had to go back and trim around each piece. So one way to avoid that is to cut directly on the line. But also I think you just have to give yourself permission that at the end you're going to have to shape up your pieces. And you don't want to cut too much off of your patterns because you might want to use that pattern set again in the future. Because once you've done this one time, you might really enjoy it and want to share it with friends or your kids. And it'll be helpful to have that pattern available. Once you have everything trimmed down and set the way that you like, then you're ready to glue those pieces down. And notice that I did not factor my crosses in there. I just wanted to make sure that I had my colors down, and then I thought I wanted to have my crosses added at the very end. So again, they're going to stand out a little bit more. And if you like that effect, you may want to even cut them where they're oversized, and it would just fill up that whole space and would really accentuate that. You may want to have them trimmed and have all of the even spaces like this if you are planning on getting fancy with your metallic pins kind of on those soldering lines. So those are some of the options and reflections that I've had as I've tried to piece this together. Okay, we're ready to glue them down. Once you have all of the stained glass elements glued down to the page, then you are ready for the next couple of steps, which include writing the scripture and deciding what you would like to do with these stitch lines. You could just leave it as is, and you're going to have white from the page peeking out and the stitch lines that are already on there that Alice did when she designed this template. You could use black pen and accentuate that a little bit more, or make it solid and add your own stitch line in there. You could even introduce this metallic element. These are Uniball Signo gel pens, and I think I got this trio set, so you could get gold, silver, and white. The white might be nice to do stitches on that dark paper. Another option, and I went ahead and I put some washi on here so you could see that. If you have some of this narrow washi, you can tell I really like that because it fills in a lot of little spaces. But you could use one color all the way around, and that would just give it a really uniform look. Or if you had some pattern washi that would maybe tie in two panels that are adjacent to one another, you could do that. And then that's just going to give you even more color and pattern over the whole page when it's finished. You might get lucky, like I had some that will really tie the solid colors in together, and you could do all of that in one section and another on the top section. So you've got a lot of options there. If you are wondering how it's going to look with black pen, if you happen to have some black washi, you can kind of play around with that. This has the alphabet on it, so I probably wouldn't use that, but that's all I have. But you can see if you do black pen all the way around, how that is really going to have the stained glass elements just really stand out. So I hope that gives you some ideas and options. You can do all sorts of things with this. Okay, let's do it. Okay, I went for washi all the way around and using the same kind. I happened to have some that just had that brown background, like the crosses already, and some of the pastel colors that I'm using. So here's a tip for you. If you want to use thin washi around here, you can do that and maintain it looking circular, but you want to do it in those small increments so it doesn't look like straight lines. And I think I would do that first, like do that whole oval first, and then come back and do those really long lines, because that's going to stabilize here. I'm going to end up with a lot of little pieces all the way around there. And because you're using narrow washi, you can just kind of fold in some wrinkles along there to curve it out.